Alright guys, getting a little started. Hit the button a little too soon, but we'll get going in just a second here. Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, not too bad. I didn't catch Nick joined. Welcome. Yeah, I just walked out of an all hands meeting, so it's not as perfect as usual. Brandon tends to do a better job actually running the hangout than I do. It's Jordan.
Hello, friends.
How's it going?
It is going. I seem to have frozen. I'm going to rejoin once I get unwired. Give me 1 second. Y'all do whatever.
Sounds good.
All right. So you're just up
So
in
yes,
Seattle for the day yesterday?
yep, back and forth.
Ah,
I'm
nice.
crazy like that,
Yeah.
but I do. Um, so yeah, Jonathan, who joined, want to talk about specifically today? I'm sure I can come up with random things to talk about because Lord knows I'm good at that. It's Jordan. Maybe. We'll see.
Hello.
I think him changing network connections actually made it worse.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's pretty frozen for me. This could be
Oh, we
Google
can
having
hear you.
issues.
Yeah, Hangout's freezing up on occasion for me here as well.
Maybe it just doesn't like me. So Jordan, what have you been up to?
Being angry at computers.
Okay, so anything new that you've been up to?
Uh, Not really. Still trying to figure out how to be a not crappy manager at work. It's a long journey.
Yeah, it's something I eventually aspire to get to, but I'm enjoying being in the weeds still.
Yeah, I've been like a regular individual contributor for so long, and now I have people who sort of depend on me to help them steer the ship, and it's hard. It's hard changing that kind of role.
Now, as a side to that, I just recently finished reading a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People for the Digital Age, and that was kind of cool. Just not necessarily for management, but just like interacting with people.
But Chris, can you really be in the weeds? You've been at your job for like 4 days now.
Well, I guess I'm just trying to say I'm an individual contributor, and I couldn't come up with those words. But yes, for those that don't know, I moved to Chef Monday.
Yeah.
You don't even
So
know, do you? You're just like, I don't know. I do something. I'm
I,
not.
I started working somewhere, and send me a paycheck, that kind of thing.
it's funny because it's been a blast. Like, um, the culture is awesome. Like the ability to just kind of time shift. Like for those that don't know, I run off of East Coast hours, except I live on the West Coast. So like I like starting at 5 in the morning, which is totally cool that I can do that because yeah. Um, but yeah, no, it's been awesome. And I was up at HQ yesterday. Uh, flew up and back to Seattle, and started digging into Chef. Go figure. Of all the things I don't have a whole lot of experience with, it's Chef specifically. So been digging into, and it's funny because I think I'm going to be asked a lot to kind of provide my experience as I move over, but I'm taking a very different approach than the average Puppet user. Like I'm starting with writing tests and starting with like, oh, how do I just make this work? And it's going to be interesting to see. And I'm looking forward to. I think the big thing I want to learn a little bit more about is solo, because like yeah, um, I know that in Puppet Land, that was one of the things I always started from a training perspective was the ability to kind of write the Puppet one-liners and then pass in a module path and do things really simply. So, and we had someone else join. How's it going, Byron? You are muted, my friend. I think
Hangout muted. Your Hangout muted.
hang up.
There we go.
Can I
Yeah.
unmute? Oh, we
There,
can.
I'm back. Doing good. Doing good.
Working on anything interesting these days?
Big stuff I'm working on right now is just like I talked about in the other ones. I'm working through some big Oracle projects and trying to do some DevOps around that. Interesting stuff with the big giant EBS suite, Oracle E-Business and databases. So I'm hoping to write some more about that and get some of my experiences out there.
That is awesome, man. And being the unofficial token enterprise guy,
Yeah.
that's been one of my biggest concerns. Is we talk so much about, ooh, shiny, I can spin up Nginx and Node. That's awesome. But where I want to see some like hotness is like people that can like push button deploy in Oracle setup, and DBAs be happy with the end result.
And some of it's kind of wrapping around existing technologies, like being able to run a Puppet deploy to send out a clone of a big financial instance, because you don't necessarily build them from scratch each time. Business analysts or developers need an instance, so a little bit different paradigm, but taking a lot of the same experiences and translating it to those giant applications.
Yeah, what always scared me was the unreproducibility of some of the systems. Like there was one of the systems I worked at UCR where like I know that people were convinced we had backups, and in fact I know we had backups. But there's a really big difference between having backups and being able to go, oh, we need to take this V880 that happens to be the spare one and get PeopleSoft back up and running on it from scratch. Good
Yeah.
luck and Godspeed.
Yes. And it's still a pain in the ass on the V880.
I miss my Spark hardware though.
Oh, I do. I cry a little bit inside every time I remember the good old days of Sun.
So Paul, you just joined. How's it going?
Yeah, pretty good. How are you all going?
Doing awesome. And you're the author of Mies, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So can I ask a favor, not as a chef employee, but as a person trying to learn the chefs?
Okay.
Could you maybe look at updating that for Chef DK?
Yeah, I've on my list of things I need to do is work out how the hell Chef DK is gonna mess with Mies and if Mies is even really still necessary with some of the new stuff that Berkshelf generators are doing. Looks like they're already doing some of the stuff that Mies does.
Mhm.
So I probably need to look at if I need to make Mies a Chef DK plugin or if I can just push the things that I like into Berkshelf itself or how I'm going to deal with all that. So
Very
that's
cool.
yeah, that's definitely a big thing I got to look at. I got Monotrama next week and then OpenStack Summit the week after, so it's probably a few weeks before I'll actually have time to sit down and do it.
Nice. Yeah, I
But
know.
I
Been
definitely
using
don't
it.
want to let it stale out because I find it very useful and I use it a lot.
So for those that aren't aware, just to kind of share, Mies is so if you're in the Puppet world, I'll use that as the first corollary. The idea of being able to override the skeleton that gets created when you run Puppet module generate. Mies basically fulfills that role by generating a well-built cookbook and all of the things that go along with it. So I've been like totally cargo culting his various templates and stuff that he's got built out for building my new cookbooks as I'm learning the chefs. So
Yeah, I got very sick of having to handcraft all these different files for, Rubocop and then some files for chef spec and then files for server spec and I was like, why do I have to do this every time? And so for a while I had a repo that had it all set up, but then things would be constantly changing and so I'd have to be modifying the repo to keep it up to date. So I figured if I use Mies, and the cool thing is with Mies, of wherever possible, use the tools themselves to generate their own config files. So it calls Berkshelf to create some Berkshelf stuff. It calls Knife to create some Knife stuff. And so there's only a few templates where it creates them itself. And that
very
way,
cool.
in theory, whenever anything else updates, it should just come through.
I'm gonna have to go look at that. I didn't catch that part. Like I was looking at some of the templates that are in there.
Yeah, they were just for some of the ones like I think like gem files and some other stuff where it's not going to change much.
Well, very cool. So I feel like we've got an enterprise thing now that I'm looking across. Cause yeah, Steve, how was PowerShell Summit?
It was awesome. I'm still kind of recovering my voice from it, but there was a pretty heavy emphasis on a lot of the desired state stuff that's been going on, and also a lot on kind of reining in controls, like to avoid kind of Snowverish situations or Snowdenish situations. I said Snover because he was giving some of those sessions. But there's there's only about 150 people or so that go to that hit that conference, but it was all real a lot of energy, a lot of interesting stuff going on. My sessions, I did 3 sessions on desired state, and they were packed. They were quite. There's a ton of questions and stuff, so it was a lot of people starting to look at the config management space, not just desired state, but just kind of wanting to get into and figure out how the whole declarative configuration management story would play out for their environments. So that was awesome.
Oh, very cool. I know when I was up in Seattle, one of the guys that's working on the Windows side of things was showing me how some of the cookbooks and recipes come together and how it builds on top of DSC. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, and that's really, it's funny because some people see DSC as kind of this as to be a competitor for Chef and Puppet and all, and it's really not the case. The whole thing where you run everything through DSC by its own natively is really just kind of this proof of concept thing to show that the agent works, and the agent and the API for it are really they're just Windows features, and they're there to be leveraged by whomever. And the story that they're trying to share with that is, if you write a DSC resource to manage something, if Chef implements support for DSC resources, if Ansible does or whomever, then you write that resource once for the Windows platform, and anybody else can consume it and use it. So you don't have to have a separate version of like a SQL Server install for Puppet and for Chef and for Ansible and for whomever. And, you can use the same resource across multiple platforms, and that's kind of the intention there. So then, like what I'm doing at Stack is, just doing straight DSC. That's just really to kind of help prove the thing out, and because I didn't want the overhead of another runtime.
Makes sense. Well, cool. Other than our two people that joined that haven't said anything. So, any particular topics people want to talk about today, or now that we've kind of gotten some status updates or pain points?
Any of you guys going to be in DevOps Days, Austin?
Unfortunately not.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to make it out for that. I do believe Matt Ray from Chef will be there, though.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be there.
Yeah, it's kind of one of these weird things where, as super excited about the community role as I am, one of the things that I've kind of consciously thought about is making sure that I'm not over traveling, because I want my wife to let me stay in the job. So, and that's been kind of cool because my boss was kind of like, well, travel as you need to. Just make sure that you're paying attention to how much is enough, or too much rather, so that we're not, stretching you too thin. So it was kind of cool about that.
Cool.
Yeah, I was hoping to go to DevOps Days, but it's on at the same time as Monitorama, and I'd already decided to go to Monitorama, so skipping this year's Austin.
Yeah, I was looking at going as well, but TechEd is coming up shortly as well, and I'm doing that. And that's an audience that really needs to hear more DevOps stuff, so I'm going to go there and be the agent provocateur there.
And that's in Houston, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I was hoping I could get in to see that.
How is TechEd as a conference? Like,
It sucks. I mean, go ahead.
So give us a little bit more background. Like, when you say that, what makes it suck?
Well, it's definitely a vendor conference pushing, a vendory salesy kind of sessions for the most part. There are a few nuggets in there that are good, and they've started doing some announcements of new stuff at TechEd. Like they alluded to at the PowerShell Summit, a DSC agent for Linux, which is probably something that System Center would use, because System Center uses OMI to when it needs to manage Linux, and so that's what that would plug into. But for the most part, sessions that are billed as like 300 or 400 level sessions are really 1 or 200 level, and they tend to be very markety. What TechEd is great for, though, is since it's a Microsoft, Microsoft event, a lot of guys who are in the enterprise space can get budget to go to it, and so it's great for meeting people, kind of talking to them, seeing what they're doing, and and making some connections that way. And so some of the like the bird of a feather sessions, they call them, or they're those tend to be a little more beneficial, as well as a lot of the hallway conversations, or things that happen, the dinner and drinks kind of conversations. So from that standpoint, and that's pretty much the reason I'm going, is so that I can have some of those conversations with people and see what's spinning up there.
Okay, so it sounds like hallway track is really where it's at when you're at TechEd.
Yeah.
And for any of our listeners that are out there listening to this after the fact, find Steve. I'm sure he's got lots to talk about.
Oh yeah.
So, very cool. So I heard Monitorama. Who all is going to Monitorama? I know, Paul, you said so. Is anyone else going?
No.
I want to go, but yeah, it was a little too late in this year to plan for it. And this time of year is crazy. And then OpenStack, you said you were going, Paul, as well?
Yeah, that's right.
How are OpenStack summits?
They're pretty good. I mean, this is only going to be my second, and the first one I went to was more as an end user rather than a contributor, so I didn't really participate in the design summit side of things, which I think is where all the interesting things happen. And the cool thing, this summit, they're actually doing an operations track for the unconference sessions, so they have, I think, 2 half to 3/4 days, Monday and Friday, of ops-based sessions, which is really cool, because that's one of the things that's really been lacking in OpenStack, is a focus on the ops side of things, and it seems like they're starting to take it seriously.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. And yeah, that's the thing that's always been kind of interesting to me, is the operational story behind OpenStack, and how do we make that better and make it more deployable. Because every time I've looked at OpenStack, when I've been in positions where it made sense to look at it, it's been, gosh, at least 1.5 years, 2 years. You looked at it and it was like, well, yeah, this isn't fully baked. I'm gonna wait on this.
Yeah, and that's what's one of the big problems. I mean, deploying it is really hard, and then running it is even harder again. So it's definitely a big problem space. I would say it's probably one of the more complicated distributed systems that you could run, especially if you want to run it at more than a couple of nodes.
So just as kind of interesting touch point there on OpenStack, they actually had a OpenStack managing OpenStack with PowerShell session at the PowerShell Summit. Don Schenk does some of the .NET SDK, I think. He was there giving a session on that. I haven't had a chance to touch OpenStack yet, but looks interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get some exposure to it while I'm at Chef. I just haven't had a chance to actually sit down and bang on it myself either.
Yeah, I think Matt Ray would definitely be happy to get some help on the OpenStack Chef stuff.
Yeah, I think it was funny he was talking about just some of the networking stuff, and that's, I think, the other aspect that's really interesting to me is, with OpenStack and with a lot of the private cloud stuff, we're not talking necessarily about just the compute side of things, because the storage side of things was fairly easy to set up and running, at least at a base level.
Right.
How good it worked or how well it worked, that's another discussion. But deploying a Swift cluster is not insanely hard, from what I understand. It's the orchestration of all the things, right? It's
right.
How do we actually deliver value using OpenStack?
Yeah. Yeah, and especially in the private sense, where in the public cloud, you pretty much have like a public IP and a private IP, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the private, you start getting to all sorts of crazy VLAN stuff, and everyone runs different networking gear, and you sort of turns into a massive yak shave just to get not Neutron, Quantum, I think it's now called, up and running and actually functional.
Well, how many different network projects are we at? I mean, are we on 6 or 7 right now?
No, there's only really the two. There's Nova Network, which was the original, and then there's Quantum, which got renamed to Neutron because of some, I don't know, licensing or trademark
That
reason.
doesn't surprise me. Quantum
Yeah,
was a big tape vendor for years,
yep,
and they still
that's right.
exist, I think.
Yeah. But then under Neutron, there's you can get drivers for all sorts of different network switches and all sorts of different methods of doing SDN and stuff. So while Neutron is one project, there's probably at least half a dozen viable or semi-viable, networking options underneath it.
Oh, very cool. And I think that that's going to be interesting to see, just listening to some of the stuff that John Willis Bachakalup has been talking about in the SDN space. And, that man, I swear, like, you look at where he starts and where he picks up, like, initiatives, you just see big things happen. So I'm convinced we're going to see some really neat stuff coming out of the SDN space soon. Um, and I think we've already seen a lot of interesting things. I just don't think the future is evenly distributed yet,
Hmm.
and playing with it is going to be fun. I would love to see, and as I'm about to say this, I'm going to have to go send Nathan an email and ask how I get access to some of the stuff. But we have Chef Metal now. I would love to have Chef Metal that or something equivalent that talks to a network switch. And I think we've got some Juniper and Cisco stuff, but like the ability to walk through that entire process would be just ridiculously sick.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one thing, there's a few of the switch vendors now can run the Chef client on them, but I think what's probably missing is some sort of networking cookbook that has LWRPs to do similar things, but via, SSH or API or whatever the switches
Mhm.
have available to them.
Well, probably something similar to the way we handle Chef Metal. That's an interesting question. I wonder how that actually works. But yeah, no, that's I, and it's the silly stuff, right? Like I always laughed because when I was you'd go to like Cisco Live and they're showing the cool things you can do with 1PK and all this good stuff, and I just want to be able to be like, okay, that switch port gets this profile,
Yeah.
and I still don't think that there is a programmatic tool that I can do that easily with, that doesn't use expect scripts.
I think Cisco has some tools if you're willing to like mail them bucket loads of cash.
But they
Yeah.
don't have APIs. At least I don't think they do.
They're getting there. So the last year or so, they've really started to get serious about OpenStack, and they're investing a lot of time and money and resources into OpenStack. And part of that is building APIs and better APIs across the network stack. So I think in
I
the
think
next
it is. I think it
12,
is based on Orion, which is big bucks.
yeah, I think in the next 12 to 18 months, we'll see a fairly large shift around that at Cisco.
Yeah, at the last Cisco Live I went to, so I guess it's been a year and a half um, since I was there. They had unveiled 1PK, and that looked really neat. But um, yeah, that's something I'm super excited about, is just to see how we can take the configuration management paradigms that we're already using as a way, in production for our servers, and apply that to the networking space, and just be able to, okay, I racked and stacked the box, um, and you can configure it. I miss the days of the Sun boxes where you could literally just plug into the serial connection, leave the stack done, and go to the serial console and go to each system. I am looking forward to a place where we can just, you can cable the entire thing up, and through standard mechanisms just automatically configure the switches, automatically go and poke at the ILOM or the IPMI to boot the thing. It automatically boots into a place where we can drop an OS on there. And I mean, to be fair, Cisco's doing a lot of these types of things with the UCS platform, but it would be nice to get to a point where we can do it with commodity hardware as well.
Yeah, but I was surprised. I was looking at the UCS stuff about a year ago now, and I was surprised that even then how much rudimentary stuff that they were missing to be able to really have a good story about like programmatically booting and installing an OS on them.
Well, and that's the bummer, right? Like they've got the bits there, they just need to put an API on it, because you can go
Right.
into the GUI and be like, okay, all of these boxes get this BIOS configuration,
Right.
and they increment their MAC addresses based on this, and they're going to be configured to do this Pixie thing. But
Yeah,
if you can't access it,
that's right. If you're using all the Cisco tools, then it's nice and easy. But to do that, you really need to be a greenfield shop.
Yeah.
Most of us have, 10, 15 years of random hardware lying around that we've, somewhat managed to cobble together to do Pixie booting with. And then Cisco comes along and says, well, you can't do it quite that way with these, but here, use our tools. And they don't seem to, or at least when I was talking to them, they didn't seem to get the fact that I still needed to use all my other tools, and I would much rather be able to, wrap my other tools around them as well as, what I already had.
well, it's that problem of like a lot of the older companies. They really focus so much on vendor lock-in, it feels like, and really where products to me provide the most value is things that allow me to plug in other things, that allow me to extend other things, and not necessarily that they've pre-done the integration, but that the way that the integration is done is trivial enough that I'm not having to write C++ code to make things work.
Yeah, they've done some of that with VMware. I mean, it seems like Cisco just followed Dell's footsteps and said, oh, Dell's going with VMware, so let's do the same interfaces with VMware. But they didn't open it up for the general, open source community to be able to replicate the same.
Exactly. And I mean, to this day, like, that's something that I'm really hoping we one of these days get is a VMware client that runs on my Mac. Unless that's changed, because last I knew, you still can't talk to vCenter from an OS 10 box.
Yeah, it's called VirtualBox running a Windows box running a VMware client.
That makes me sad. And to be fair, like that's something that's been huge just in my week at Chef. That one of the discussions is how do we make the Windows experience better? Because like all of us web hipsters were like, oh, well, I can deploy it from my Mac and it's awesome in the Linux. But how do we, for those that are in the enterprise where they don't have a choice, like how do we make that experience better? Like, I'm dying to see 1DK come out on. What is it called for Windows? Or 1DK. I am so crossing streams there. Chef DK. I'm looking forward to Chef DK on Windows because I think I'm going to try and convince my boss to let me buy like a ThinkPad and like spend a month just immersed in Windows after I've kind of gotten through this pain of and maybe not pain because the Chef experience so far has not been bad, but learning Chef and understanding how Chef works, and then I want to kind of spend some time on the Windows platform and see what that how does that experience translate, and B, am I still able to be just as productive?
Well, it's come a long way. Vagrant came out not long ago officially. Vagrant with Hyper-V, and it actually works really well. I mean, impressively well. And then you throw DSC on top of that. It's almost embarrassing to say that, like, compared to my Red Hat systems, Windows is actually more configurable from a desired state config than what my Red Hat boxes are. And that's kudos to Microsoft. I mean, it'd be interesting to see if they push that, like you said, in the Xamarin or whatever they are for the Linux side. They come from their management tools, but it's definitely come a long way.
Well, and that's the funny part, right? Is like I talk to my Microsoft friends. I mean, outside of Steve, who's like totally drinking the Kool-Aid. So like some of the Microsoft people are like, "Oh, I don't understand this DSC shit. Like, why is this even a thing?" And they're doing dumb things. And there's a bunch of us that are in like the Unixy like config management domain. We're like, "Holy crap, this is so awesome!"
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting just to watch that shift.
Yeah, and upcoming Vagrant 1.6 is going to have they're rolling in the Vagrant Windows plugin natively, which would be nice.
What was it like, Vagrant RDP, where like you can run
Yeah.
Vagrant and it gives you an RDP session?
I would prefer them not to do that because RDP is not a management tool. Give me just as long as I got my WinRM, then I can hit my PowerShell endpoint. I'm happy with that. But yeah, some people are fixated on their RDP.
Which,
I
as
look
a
for reasons
note,
to take it away.
I want to learn me some WinRM. Like, yeah, we should do
Yeah.
that soon. We'll have to pair on that because I'm excited about the idea of WinRM. I just wish
Well-
there was like an OS 10 WinRM client.
Yeah. Some of the rumors that came out at the PowerShell Summit was they started floating the idea of open sourcing PowerShell, and going back to the VMware thing, PowerCLI for managing VMware stuff is awesome. They were one of the first people to jump on the PowerShell bandwagon, and they have an awesome set of tools for managing VMware infrastructure.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I almost never need the full client. The web client from the vSphere will work relatively well, and then for anything you have to do in detail, the PowerCLI is the way to go.
Yeah, why did they go with Flash? Yeah,
Yeah, well, it works fine in Chrome.
it's
So I'm kind of cocking my head. For those that aren't on the call, I like Googled OSX Pi WinRM, but I'll paste it into the chat messagey thingy.
Yeah, and there's a Ruby WinRM gem,
Ooh.
and that's actually what Vagrant Windows uses, and works pretty well. They
Where did it
I don't
go?
know. I don't think it's been updated to fully work well with the latest version of WinRM, but it does give you the most basic functionality, and it also lets you run remote command line, remote PowerShell, execute WMI queries, that kind of stuff.
Wait a second. So basically, I can like fire up IRB and run a command and
Yeah.
have a shell. Ooh. Ooh. How do I find this? Need to go find.
It's on GitHub. It's
WinRM. WinRB, WinRM, or ZenChild?
WinRB.
ZenChild does sound fun though.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the forks of it. Yeah,
That
it's
is
got some
so
examples there. Yeah, and that's what the Vagrant Windows plugin uses, and eventually I think probably native Vagrant will be using.
Oh, dude. And one of my coworkers is apparently a contributor.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask him about that. That is awesome.
Yeah, I actually had to kind of puzzle my way. I learned a little bit of Ruby, just enough to understand what the hell was going on there, so I could offer some contributions to the Vagrant Windows plugin so it would work with Server 2012 and newer, or anything with WinRM 3 or newer. Because it's been awesome for testing DSC stuff.
That is really interesting. So so crazy question. Can you run server spec on Windows? Or does
No
anyone know?
idea.
Okay, I haven't looked yet either. So
I'm sure it'd run. Whether it has the hooks to actually look for open ports and things like that would depend on, I guess, how good the libraries underneath it are.
well, I guess
Server spec init shows on their default screen on the page shows Windows as an option.
Woohoo! I'm gonna have to play with this. Okay, just so that we're all clear, I swear I'm not getting excited about Windows.
Yeah, come to the dark side, baby. Yeah.
Oh.
It's getting pretty familiar over here with a good shell, taking away UIs. It's config management agent on the box by default. It's not a bad life.
Yeah, I just My biggest problem is I'm gonna have to like learn how to type faster because like the PowerShell commands are like 30 characters each.
Yeah, no. P sharp or PS Readline out on GitHub makes your shell experience much more fun and enjoyable and tolerable. A lot of tab completion stuff.
I will have to add that to my list of things when at some point in the not too
Yep.
distant future.
When you have all that excess free time.
Yeah, free
Yeah.
time. I see that going away. So much to do, man. That's I think one of the coolest parts about working at Chef is there's just like I know that like when I've had like wow, I feel like I'm from California right now.
Like totally, man.
I know. So that's one of the things that's always kind of an indicator to me is when the projects at work aren't enough to kind of keep me super excited about computing and the interwebs. And Chef, just everything about where I'm sitting right now, there's just so much awesomeness ahead of me. It's way cool. Which I should say we're hiring, and I've been with the company a week, and I would tell you the community is awesome, or the culture is awesome, but come back in a couple weeks and ask me that again, and I will probably say the same thing, but we'll just be careful with that. Oh, IRC. I missed that. Let's see.
Yep.
Okay, for the record, I am horrible as a host for those of you that are listening on IRC and maybe talking about things. Yeah. Whoa, wait a second. Dave Core, did you just say what I think you just said? Okay, give me 1 second here, guys. I need to
Yeah,
invest.
there's an audio podcast there. Yeah. Hangups.com.
I feel
There's an
like
RSS feed, iTunes.
I feel like a bad organizer. I didn't know about that.
So for those of you who aren't reading along in IRC, it was mentioned that Hangups.com has an audio podcast now. So you can subscribe in iTunes or via RSS if you use any other client. So Hangups.com.
That is way cool.
See, I got your back, Chris.
I need all the help I can get.
So I have a question I asked in Twitter earlier and didn't get a lot of response. One thing, switching to ChefDK, it's now fighting with my Ruby a lot. So I'm planning on blowing away RVM and working out what I want to do. I had a couple of people recommend RBN. What are people's thoughts on Rubies and Ruby
So
management?
here's actually what I did. And I, as I said, I've only been playing with it for a little bit. You cut in and out there, Paul. You there, or am I cutting out?
You're
cutting out.
Yep. So we have no idea what you did.
Okay, so let's try that again. So what I've done is I set my default Ruby to System Ruby. I went into my path, and I'll link it in the IRC channel. If you go to the README, there's setting it as your default environment. And I haven't tested it yet, but in theory, the way RVM works, I should be able to set things up with ChefDK in my path, and then use RVM to change up my Ruby environment when I actually need Ruby. So that's the direction I'm headed, and I'll go find a link to the awesomeness in the ChefDK README.
Yeah, I think I had some hokiness in my RBN because it wouldn't actually let me uninstall any of my existing gems, and so that was probably contributing to it. I went and put the paths for ChefDK first, and even then, for some reason, my box was still trying to hit gems in RVM. So I figure I should just blow away the whole lot, because I did a Mavericks upgrade as well, and so I'm wondering if the combination of the Mavericks upgrade and RVM and ChefDK has just exploded my system.
Have you tried, just out of curiosity, actually using or doing an RVM use system
No, I haven't.
and then trying the Chef DK stuff? Because that's how I had to do it.
Right, that's a good idea. I should try that. Cool.
Yeah, that's what I had to do. Is basically RVM use system, and I set that as my default Ruby. And then when I've got a project that I'm using a gem set for, or a separate Ruby for, then I use RVM to switch to it. And then anytime I'm doing Chef development, I just move back to system Ruby.
Cool. I wonder what version System Ruby is on this thing. Oh, 2? How is my System Ruby 2?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
2.
probably I had to compile it myself at some point, I guess. Because does OS X come with
No, that's actually
Ruby?
Yep. Default Mavericks is 2 now.
Nice. All right.
Yep.
Thank you. You just solved my problem.
Not a problem. Yeah. For me the key has been using the system, or like doing RVM use system so that it unsets all the crazy environment variables that override gem paths and stuff.
Yep.
And then when I actually am working on Ruby projects using RVM.
Very cool. Anyone else have any tech support questions for Chris?
Since we're in chef ops, it's time to throw in your chef questions.
Hey, I'll answer Puppet questions too. No one's throwing out Puppet questions though.
What's the testing strategies in Puppet like these days? Because last time I looked, there still wasn't really a lot of testing options. And most Puppet people I talk to, I say things like, test-driven development and unit tests, and they freak out and go, "Why would you ever want to do that?"
So the answer is Puppet RSpec,
Okay.
or RSpec Puppet, I forget which one. And then there's Beaker, but I don't fully understand how that works. I never got on that bandwagon. I was just using RSpec Puppet or Puppet RSpec. I forget which order it goes in. And then my next steps that I just never got to was using like Puppet Server Spec. If you want, hit me up and I will link you to my slides from PuppetConf last year.
Cool.
So yeah. All right. Well, looking at the time, I know we started late, but does anyone have any announcements they want to get out there before we move towards closing it up today?
I just registered for DevOps Days Pittsburgh too. That's coming up at the end of May, and of course Austin, which is sold out Monday and Tuesday. But they're pushing people through the waiting list, so if you're still lazy and hadn't got your tickets yet, go get on the waiting list. They might be able to get you in.
For sure. Yeah, DevOps Days Pittsburgh is looking like it's going to be freaking awesome. And I want to say DevOps Days Minneapolis is coming up as well.
Yeah, Minneapolis, July 18 and 19. Ooh, I might be able to make that.
Sweet.
That's not that far.
I will be in on the East Coast at some place. Yay, vacation.
Vacation? How can you talk about vacation? You just started working. Come on.
Hey, we've got unlimited PTO.
Hey, I don't know if you mentioned in the IRC chat that there's the podcasts are now available at what is it? Hangops.com.
Yes.
That's big news.
I think
Yeah.
is it? Yeah, it is .com. Yeah, definitely. So we kind of talked.
Well, I think we can talk about it. I don't know if Chris can talk about it.
Yeah, he's having a little trouble with that one.
But yeah, I'm a big tech podcast junkie. So having the old, assuming they're all the older ones are archived as well, I'll definitely be going through those. I was just at the LA DevOps monthly meetup on Monday in Hollywood, and Brandon Burton was recommending, there was, I guess, a OpenStack related Hangops in December, so I got to dig that up and listen to it.
Good deal.
All right, guys. Well, I think we'll call it at that. Thank you very much for joining us. And yeah.
All right.
Later, guys.
Later, guys.
Yeah.
See you.
See ya.